module.
Okay,
So Goku, how do you feel about modules?
I feel great. Okay, so here we go, guys. So, are we deciding to just use the same name for everything? So this is the Cost of Mana. It's me, Avery.
Cody.
And Matt.
Okay, so all of us, we're going to be talking today about modules. Mainly our feelings on modules, what we feel is good about them, bad about them, what we can take from them and add them to our games, all kinds of different things. So just a little bit of background about modules, and this is what we're actually talking about is D&D modules. So the original module came out back in 1980, and it was Slave Pits of the Underworld. Did any of you guys actually play that?
No, but I'm really proud of you for doing your research and homework. Coming
Thank you.
prepared.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
I've never heard of it either, so I mean, I'm just looking it up
Was
right
that
now.
made for like AD&D? That wasn't first edition, was it? Was the second edition out then? I don't know my D&D
Look it
timeline.
It looks like A1 through 4 is what the first edition
Okay.
AD&D.
Okay.
I know their modules kind of started out as a tournament kind of gameplay
I just read
that
that
they
the other
used
day.
to run, and it was like competitive D&D where they would
at
try to
conventions
see
and things.
how far the players could outlast the DM. Back when it was more adversarial and like the DM was trying to kill the players
Was
a
it
lot
still
more.
players versus DM, or was that more player versus player back then?
I think it was player versus DM.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really quick though, before we get too far into the module stuff, what I'd like to do is maybe just start off with what is recently happened in your campaign. Maybe in the future we'll do like a recap up to this point. So we'll just start with Matt and then go to Cody, and then I don't really have too much to say because we didn't play this last week, but next time we'll catch up on mine. So
Nice. Cool. So my group, we're currently running through the Lost Mines of Phandelver, the 5th edition starter box set. And I'm running 4 complete 100% newbies to anything RPG and tabletop. And then our friend Seth's playing with us, and he's got more experience than I do, but I'm DMing it. So yeah, I'm good. It's a good episode to talk about because I'm playing through a module. And we've gotten 2 sessions in. The group has, spoiler alert for anybody, we've cleared the Red Brand Brigand lair, and the group is setting out to kind of tie up some loose ends and get some more information. They're very kill happy and kind of hard to get information from dead people, so they're kind of at a loss right now. They had some really good opportunities to get some information, but they're the type of people that kick down doors and kill first and worry about the consequences later. So we're currently headed to go find one of the druids in, I think, the ruined town of Thunder Tree, which is just on the western edge of Neverwinter Forest. So it's slow couple sessions. We had an actual 6th player join us this last session. One of our players' sisters was in from out of town and asked me if I could find a place for her to play. And I was like, yeah, I think we have a place. Our paladin had picked up a local child from the town of Phandalin and convinced the mom of the child to allow this child to go on an adventure with this misfit group of adventurers. So I threw her the character sheet for this little 10-year-old halfling boy, and surprisingly managed to stay alive. So we didn't really do a whole lot. We played for about 5 hours and made it about a page and a half of progress in the module. It was quite surprising the amount of time we spent just role-playing and having fun in characters and not really progressing much in the story, and it feels okay and good. All of the players they don't know anything different. They don't know that, I need to be progressing so many, so much per campaign or per session. None of them are really worried about XP or their next level. They've all hit level 3 now, luckily, so they're just all getting their. Everyone's got their class components all kind of figured out, and everyone's kind of coming up to speed. So the next few sessions should be pretty good. Quickly realizing that the adventure is not scaled well for 5 characters, so the next episode will definitely see some amped up difficulty, I feel.
Nice. What about you, Cody?
So I'm currently running a party of anywhere from 5 to 7 players through an Arabian Nights style campaign. Currently, the party has kind of got wound up in some sort of mystical seal from a church, some kind of key or something. They're not really sure what it is yet, but they're trying to kind of gather more information on it. We also had a guest player in ours this session. A brother of one of the players was in town, so we had him come in. It was pretty much a travel campaign. Yeah, very similar.
Just didn't get much done.
But we did have a couple encounters along the way. We pretty much got a week's worth of travel in through the session. Stopping here and there for like a little bit of environment stuff, but nothing crazy. There was like a sandstorm that they got caught up in. But they ended up meeting up with this hill giant that at first assaulted them and was starting to really start to damage the party, but saw them start to cast spells and stuff and thought he could maybe use them to his advantage. So he bargained with them. He had a pair of brothers he wanted dead. So he teamed up with the party, offering them some gold to come back and slay his brothers in their sleep.
Fun.
So the party took him up on that. Were successful in killing the brothers and went with the bargain, and everything went pretty smooth there. From there on, they traveled to their location, which was a holy shrine that was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. That they're now acquiring more information on the talisman, because that's where the talisman was last located before they came into acquiring it. And that's kind of where we wrapped up.
Sweet. So, I guess it's a good time to talk about modules. It sounds like both of you guys are playing modules. So, what is your experience with modules, Cody?
So I started DMing probably about 5 years ago now. My first experience DMing, I did a homebrew campaign. Kind of wrote it all up myself and just kind of made it up as I went. It was good, which I think homebrews have a lot of advantages because it's your story, so you kind of know the end goal and everything. But after a while, I got busier and I didn't have as much time, and I started kind of pilfering from modules, picking here and there pieces that I liked. I kind of started out with pulling dungeons out of a few different books. I picked up The Yawning Portal, which is a series of classic dungeons from D&D's history. And I found
that at the bottom of a tavern in Waterdeep.
It is. Well, in my campaign it wasn't. I didn't really use the book per se.
Okay.
As far as the tavern, but I took dungeons and I mixed them into my campaign.
Okay.
Which I found to be very easy to just lift stuff and kind of change a few things to make it fit my campaign.
Sure.
And drop it in. And that was kind of my first start with modules. Since then, I've been progressing to use more and more module stuff. And currently I'm using an Al-Qadim setting, which is from 2nd edition, and porting it over to 5th edition. I'm taking key story elements and mixing them into my campaign, but still shifting it into my own. Like, things I don't like, I take out. That don't fit, I remove. And if story needs to go in a slightly different direction, I'll just change things as I go.
So it's like you learned how to program for the first time by looking at somebody's source code and just
A little bit,
just
Yeah.
taking what
Yeah.
you like from it and
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to make it all work
Yeah.
as something new.
yeah. So that's kind of been my experience with modules. Probably past 3 years I've been playing around with them.
Nice. What about you?
My first experience with a module was, I think it was Pathfinder's Rise of the Rune Lord.
Okay.
Read about it, and it was this invasion of goblins in this town. I was really enamored by the idea of it, and I never ran it, but that was the first one I read. I just started DMing seriously, I guess, in the last couple of months. And I guess my extensive knowledge of it is what I'm just currently running with the Lost Mines of Phandelver. And for somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of spare time to sit down and think with a pencil and just write, having just a couple brief moments before a session to rescan the module for those key elements I'm looking to hit on, and start down with the session, and you know where you're beginning, and you have an idea of where you want to get, but allow your party to experience the world that the module creates and allow them to exist within it. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
no,
one
it's,
chord will destroy everything.
yeah, no, I don't really have much experience with modules, but I have better luck with modules than homebrews. I've had several attempts at starting my own world, and quickly realizing I don't have the chops for it yet, because I just started out trying that and had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So hopefully running a few modules is going to give me some good experience under my belt. The comfort level of DMing is just going up every single session. There's no more nerves anymore. I'm not dreading the start of a session. It's just met with pure happiness and joy to be around people that just like spending time together doing.
Would you say that's the plus side of running
yeah.
a module? Is that you don't have any prep work, or the prep work is minimal?
For somebody who doesn't have a lot of free time, modules are the way to go. You just sit down, you read through it once or twice, you hit on the key components again, you kind of have an idea. I don't necessarily think you railroad your players, but you're playing a module, it's a story. It's not really meant to be a free form experience. There's always an end goal in sight that the players need to continue to work towards, and the DM needs to keep them on track with. Just don't herd them in that direction. Get them there, but don't let them know you're getting them there.
So the module you're using is based off of the starter kit,
Yeah.
and then what level does that module leave people up on?
So it starts at level 1, and it's a module level 1 to 5. So
Okay.
it's just a really great tutorial. Like I said, I've got 4 completely new role-playing characters, role-playing players, and we all made characters for it. We didn't use any of the pre-mades, and I think that really lends to it too. Yes, the pre-mades are really well fleshed out, and they kind of give you a reason for being in that part of the world, and they tie you in with the NPCs, but I think that's easily done in a session or two of actual playing. The characters get an idea for it, and you start making up reasons, and you don't have to have the whole backstory figured out at first session. I think that's kind of the fun of D&Ding, is figuring out your character's growth as well as his backstory as you play, and you're just kind of like, that kind of sounds cool. I'm gonna try and figure out how to work that in, and you do it as a team, and everybody wins.
That's kind of what's going on in your game, right? So I actually play in Cody's game, and it doesn't feel like it's playing a module. So for myself, I actually don't have any experience playing running modules.
Oh wow.
But it doesn't feel like I'm actually in a module. So maybe it's changed my mind on exactly what modules are. I don't know how much of the module you're following. Like how much of the module are you?
Yeah, so I could go into that a little bit. As far as what you were saying, where you feel like there's not very much prep work and stuff, I don't quite feel that way.
There's still a lot of prep
so
work.
yeah, but that might be my style too. The way I do it is, so obviously I've read the module all the way through, and I go back and I figure out key points, information. But I also tend to take that information. I don't run straight out of the module. I write down what is going on and where the story's going, and I end up tweaking a lot of things. I'm very particular about things that don't make sense. I'm like, this isn't going to be in here. Like, I want it to be logical.
Sure.
The routes I go. So I feel like I still put a decent amount of prep work in. I find that the module is more of a tool towards inspiration for me. It kind of, I see something, I'm like, okay, this is a story I want to tell. I might have to tweak it here and there. But as far as what I'm running on the module, I would say I'm probably running 70% of what the module is saying. I'm not running one particular module. I'm actually running a couple different ones mixed together with different arcing paths that you guys could go if you wanted. So it's kind of a mashup of modules actually that I'm running at the moment.
Yeah. So when we started, I didn't do a good enough job explaining exactly what a module is. So a module, I feel like now thinking about it, is it's pretty much a usually start, right? It's never mid game. You don't start at level 5.
You can. There are modules that start at different levels.
Yep. So you start at a certain level, and then there's a goal to be at a certain level by the end.
Yeah,
and
typically,
you have an end boss. And these are those instances where most of the time, not every time, then maybe that'll be a question here in a bit, they end one of those modules. The adventure is over. It's got your preset NPCs, non-player characters, your preset bosses, preset items. You might throw a couple items in there, but it's all preset for the most part.
Yeah.
Just in case someone actually listens to this and has no idea what they're talking about when it comes to modules.
It's a pre-made story.
So would you agree with what Cody was talking about? There is some prep work still involved in it.
No,
so
absolutely.
if someone was to pick up the starter set, it's probably still good for brand new players to pick up and start playing, but it might require a little bit of work. No work at all, unless you want to add work to it.
Absolutely, and it comes down to a group basis, I think. You can run that game as a railroad where it's scene. You describe it, players play in it, you conclude it, boom, next scene. And you could just, it's laid out that way to where it's just very blocky and it flows together. But you can also, there's room to allow your players to think freely and come to different conclusions than what the book presents. There's always opportunities to do something that isn't explained. I think that's kind of the hard part as a beginning DM, is having all of these players that have these pretty gnarly, interesting ideas that have nothing to do with what's in the module at all, but you want to reward their creativity and their expression of their character, and as long as it fits in with the story and their character, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, no, it still requires quite a bit of work. You got to read the whole thing. You got to know where you're going, because you're still leading the group. You can't just pick it up and be like, all right, guys, let's play, and we'll work our way through it.
Yeah.
The DM still needs to know what each scene is, who's in it, where it goes afterwards, a couple steps. The problem with modules, though, is you don't create any of those NPCs or that world. So as the DM, it takes a little bit of work to get invested mentally into it, so that you can provide a really good experience for your players. That's been my challenge and my struggle, is none of those characters, I mean, there's only so much printed material to read from, and some of those NPCs get 2 sentences, but my players spend a session and a half dealing with this one NPC that has minimal information provided for me, so you have to kind of fill in the gaps spontaneously often. So that's the challenge, I think, with modules, is the unfamiliarity of it and the randomness of your group.
Yeah. So we talked mostly about like the pros, it sounds like, of running a module. Well, Matt just kind of hit on some of the key points of things that he doesn't either like or a little bit more of a con. what would you say is a con to using a module over a custom world or even a preset world?
Yeah, I agree with what Matt's saying as far as the story's kind of set in a certain direction, and if people want to deviate from it, it kind of leaves you improvising quite a bit, which I feel like is a part of D&D anyways, even if you're doing a custom world. The thing with the modules is they can't predict what your players are going to do. Like, they have kind of a set story, but you have to still be somewhat flexible because a party might want to go talk to a random farmer boy, and
Why would you do that?
if they're that invested in this NPC, sure, this farmer boy's got something interesting going on with him, and you kind of flow
Everybody
from there.
knows something.
Yeah. So I do agree that modules are very specific. I'm not sure about. I played a little bit of the Fen Delver, and I do feel like 5th edition is doing a good job of kind of expanding the sandbox a little bit to let more like normal flow of the
Sure.
game go. It's not just point A to point B to
Right.
point C necessarily. But I think as far as like other negativities in modules, I don't see a ton unless maybe player knowledge. Possibly,
Yes.
I haven't experienced it, but I guess a player could have played the module before if it's an experienced player, or they could look up information on it and get key elements of the story.
Yeah.
And then your big badass boss is one
Yeah.
shot by a bear because
But then
they
I
sneak
think
in through
I,
the back door.
I think if that's the
Yeah.
case, I feel like you have other issues than running a module.
Sure, absolutely.
That's a table issue.
Yeah. And you can't correct that. That's just a player thing, and
Yeah.
you just learn to deal with it. And suddenly, this guy has invulnerability
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
round or two.
Yeah.
Oops.
Uh,
Yeah, very hard
so
to detect.
I know that Matt, you've played modules or ran modules, and you haven't had success with making custom worlds and stuff like that. What is your plan once this module runs out? Are you going to? Do your players want to keep playing in this world
Oh
with those
yeah,
people?
these guys are
Um,
jonesing for D&D. It's everything I can do to keep them from playing weekly. It's really a really cool experience actually. So we've got 2 drows in the group, which doesn't make sense, but we make it make sense. It doesn't have to be a big racial thing in the world of Faerun. You can just deal with that later, you know. But 2 of the drows, the females, they've known of each other for a long time, and they came from the underworld, and they haven't really explained how or why or how they got here or why they left. Maybe we'll get to that later. But they have talked about some ambitions about stopping or trying to stop the queen from doing her reverence spell. I think my wife, the druid Dro, she was reading some old books on the underworld and seeing that the queen Lilith,
Loth,
Loth, yeah,
the
sorry.
Spider Queen.
Punished, don't know my stuff. But yeah, she was talking about reading through it, and she was trying to figure out how to raise these dead spirits. And my wife, as the druid, was like, I want to stop her. I was like, I mean, probably not going to be able to, but I mean, if you want to explore what that looks like, let's head to the underworld after level 5. And everyone
Yeah.
was kind of like, can we do that?
So is there a module
Yeah.
that you're planning on picking up?
No.
that will run that?
Yes, so I'm going to pick up, so I'm pretty certain there's an underworld module currently for 5th edition. I don't
Okay.
know what it starts at. I haven't read it. I think it exists. And if it does, I'm going to get it and just use it for inspiration and
Nice.
attempt to do a more free flowy pull from the module, but try and step away from it a little bit.
Is
And-
that module set in Forgotten Realms?
Yeah.
Is that where you're going to keep your players?
Yeah, I think so. Until they stumble upon a mystical portal that sends them to the world of 2049, and we play Shadowrun Steampunk for an episode or 2.
Yeah. Do you have an end game for your module? Are you using that module up to a point, or are you gonna run it all the way?
I
through?
am. I'm using the module up to where it ends. It has a conclusion, which is I'm trying to see if the party ends up going that direction.
Sure.
But I plan on using it up to that direction, and then I don't plan on stopping from that point. At that point, I imagine I'll just build out in homebrew some stuff. It kind of depends. I don't plan too far ahead, honestly. I really plan maybe 1 session, 2 sessions ahead, just because things could change. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself.
Wasted work.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm sure, like, with the module, it probably helps you a lot with deciding if you're going to put a lot of work into certain aspects of the game.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's part of, like, even just being a DM. You have to adjust for the players versus adjusting for what you want to see.
Exactly. It's not about you. It's about the other people at the table more than anything.
Yeah. I've really liked, and I can't remember who said this, but when you're running D&D, exactly what you said, it's ran for the players. It's not ran for yourself. And if you're running it for yourself, then you should just write a book.
Yep.
Because the whole point of D&D is to have people engaged, and they're part of that.
Maybe HBO should have done that with season 8.
Yeah.
Just write a fucking book.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find out quickly that, especially, so a little bit on homebrews, you'll find out quickly that no one cares about the lore that you came up with for your campaign.
Right.
I mean, you might get some players that are invested into it. For
Sure.
the most part, you do that for yourself. And if anyone ever wants to look at it, awesome, you have it on hand.
Right.
But yeah,
Never
players
once have
don't
my
care.
players asked, hey, what's the backstory of this place?
Yeah.
What's been happening for
Yeah.
the last couple hundred
Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
I want to know the deets.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
They just want to know what's behind the door and if they can stab it and what's in the pockets.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, that's based on, like, the group itself? For example, I don't know how much we want to get into, like, spoilers within our games, because there's a lot of intertwining with Cody plays in my game and I play in his, but I mean, it won't bother me if we talk about it. But one of the things that me and Cody had talked about is his group has never, maybe they don't not care about other players when they die, but we want, like, I want, if something happens to my character or just in general, make them feel invested in each other. There was 2 characters that died in one of your games 2 games ago, and when I got back into the game, it was almost as a who cared kind of situation.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Character death should
and
happen.
I don't think it was. Yeah, I don't think it was Cody.
No, it's
Cody opened it
that's
up
down
for
to the
us to do
players.
stuff, or them to do stuff, because I wasn't there. But I want to challenge those players to actually care about the game, which in general I think would care more about.
Don't care about the
Care-
game. Care about the world.
Yeah, care about the world, care about the party is actually where we're going to start, or I want to start, is try to get them to actually give a shit about each other, and then move from there.
Be careful with that, though. Don't force a character that's like that roguish, standoffish type. I mean, I guess don't try and lead them into being like happy friends if they don't want to be.
So I'll explain what I'm going to do. So this is off topic a little bit, but I think that's fine. We've kind of hit a lot of aspects of like modules. Maybe we'll just hit it real quick. I have never used modules, so I don't really even have that much of an opinion. I felt like with modules, they were very constrained. Like, this is what's supposed to happen, that's what's supposed to happen, things like that, without much adventuring. And from talking to you and talking to Cody, you, Matt, talking to Cody,
you and you,
you and you,
signals.
it sounds like it's not exactly like that. So it opens me up to taking, maybe reading more modules and like taking pieces from modules and bringing them into my world. What's maybe the last kind of thought for you on just modules in general and giving advice on using modules?
I'm glad they exist. Use them without prejudice, but don't be afraid to deviate from what's written there and allow your characters, and your players rather, to make their own choices. Don't hamstring them into fitting in with the story if their characters aren't necessarily involved in the actual story itself. They can be a background character and let some of the other people take along with it, but it gives just a really good starting and ending point, and then everything in between you just make up as you go along and pull snippets from. It's just a great resource and makes D&D itself more accessible to people with time constraints, creativity constraints. Not everybody can sit there and flesh out J.R.R. Martin world and know tens of thousands of NPCs and their aspirations and desires in a game. So having a module present that for you is a good resource.
Turn the music off.
It's about to get good. We don't want a copyright claim.
No. No, I agree with that. I think that that's a topic that we should probably maybe even talk about in the future is movies. I know that growing up and listening to like Lord of the Rings, my mom read it, or just reading it myself. I imagine that's how D&D would play out.
Right.
And it's not. And
No.
I think a lot of like I said, these are topics we can talk about later, but the whole Mercer effect, and then also just Game of Thrones in general.
Pop culture is
Yeah.
all about nerd culture right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, and
We're living in a good time.
people going into it thinking they're going to be Jon Snow. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You're more likely going to be the peasant that's picking up turnips than
You're going to be Sam Tarley.
yeah, you're going to be Sam Tarley. Yeah. So modules. Last kind of thought on modules from you.
Yeah, so
Cody?
I definitely agree that they are amazing. I think don't be afraid to go in and pick pieces from modules. Even if you're not running the whole module, don't be afraid to take scenarios or battles or dungeons that you find interesting and throw them into your world. Like, that stuff is there for that. And that goes further than just modules. Don't be afraid to take characters from movies, maybe change their gender or something to kind of throw players off. But everything's kind of open in D&D, and like there's no reason you shouldn't use those things to your advantage. As far as modules too, one thing I want to say that was kind of a pro that I didn't really mention is the shared experience. I think there's a weird aspect with modules where if they're close enough done to the same, people have stories about, oh yeah, I went through the Tomb of Horrors, this happened to me, oh, I was killed here, where'd you die? It's like something that you can't really experience through your home campaigns because everyone's home campaign is different.
Right.
So there are like almost like a shared story
Creates
to
a
modules.
community.
It does,
Yeah.
to a degree.
Yeah. No, I
It's pretty
agree
cool.
with
I
that.
like that.
So, to go back to what I was talking about, like with the game that Cody's running, I'm one of the characters in there, and I'm not trying to force a relationship or anything.
He's trying to get information.
Trying to get information. What I was meaning by that is just, Cody and I had talked about things, and Cody said like he's in the past with the same group that he's run for like 3, 4, 5 years now. Situations that should hit you in the heart, and it doesn't. And I don't fully believe that every time it falls on the DM. I think a lot of times that's the players not being engaged.
Absolutely. It's
know?
the player's responsibility to feel
Yeah.
what their characters feel. And if they a teammate dies and they're like, what are you going to reroll as?
Right.
Kind of tells you that they're just not invested in the other character, it seems.
Yeah. So there's two things that are going on with my character that I'll explain. Is we are a group of people that are traveling together mainly just to benefit each other, just to make gold as of right now. But my character's backstory is that he actually is from the north, the country of like Runic, and he's traveled south looking for his family who's been taken as slaves. And so far there's been one chance, and I'm going to keep trying to push it, where me and my character believes he's like made a connection with another character who can barely even talk. And so he's going to start trying to open up and tell exactly what's going on. He's a paladin. He has like crazy AC, crazy HP. He pretty much, his goal is to protect the party. And part of that protection is the fact that he wasn't able to protect his two daughters and his wife from being taken.
Sure.
And that's his weakness. And I really want to try to push that. I'm leaving it up to the DM, obviously, to decide what happens to my family. But in my head, I'm running scenarios of like, what if I find them and they're dead? You know,
You're preparing yourself mentally for the character's eventualities.
exactly. Or what happens when I find them, or you know, what's going to happen, and how am I going to try to bring that experience with the other players. Luckily, I can kind of cry on demand, so I'm definitely going to push that. And
Prove it. You can't.
I will. I'll do
that's
it.
a bold
by
statement,
the end
sir.
By the end of the thing, we'll just start crying. But I think that it's the players' jobs to bring that in, and I think when you get a bunch of players that, to touch on what you guys were talking about, who don't give a fuck about the history of these places,
Right.
I actually don't think it's bad. And I told Cody, use me. Like, I don't get mad, or I don't like give up on a situation if I know the outcome. Like, if I know the spoiler, I want to see how that happens. You know what I mean? And so, I would love to like see these things that Cody has come up with and imagine how they're going to play out to actually play out. Because I think it's a shame that these guys haven't had that situation where the next day they're blaming themselves for their friend dying or failing at a mission, or
Right.
you know, instead of just the next day we wake up and you're looking for the next mission.
Right.
You know.
Yep.
Go play a video game.
Exactly. If you want to go win all the time, turn your computer on.
Yeah. How do you feel about, like, as a DM, to push your players to care? I mean, from the stories you've told me, it sounds like your players care
My
a lot
players
about
care
each other.
A lot about each other.
Yeah.
But they're all really good friends outside of the game. Most of them are or were co-workers. So I feel like when we actually do get to a death, and I'm not shying away, I'm trying my hardest.
Yeah.
But the dice dictate the forwardness of the game. I do think that depending on the character that dies, and I feel that if any one of them were to die, I do think that the group as a whole would mourn that character, and the tales of that character, or the shenanigans, or the tomfoolery of that character would still come up. It would be like a pop culture reference. It's like, oh, hey, remember that time that one guy did that one thing? It's like the whole group is quite vested in the group story, not just their story.
Right.
So in my case, I feel like everybody's on the same page. So when that does happen, that'll be a pretty fun episode to talk about.
What about you, Cody? Like, what do you feel about the current party that you have? I mean, I play in that group, so I feel like it's a pretty solid group. But do you feel like?
I feel like they are still very individual characters. So in game time, they've maybe been together, let's say 3 weeks. So we did have a party member go down, and he perished in a fight. The party wasn't super broken up about it, but I also realized that these characters have known each other like a week. So, I mean,
Why would you?
you know, they've had some experience together, but maybe they wouldn't to a degree. I do think, hopefully, by the end, I'm okay with members kind of being individuals first. The hope is down the road that these things stack up and these characters do start to care about each other. I don't expect players to just invest into each other right away, because they're individual characters telling individual stories. But I think it's the group coming together down the road. Hopefully, there's more emotional weight behind it. Things that happen.
How long was the last game you played?
How long was the last game?
Not you as a player, but you ran with this group of guys.
Maybe 6 months.
And then in the 6 months of them being together, was there any player deaths?
Not in this last one. No.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get to is more. I totally agree with what you're saying. I feel like, and maybe I've misheard you, it doesn't feel like that group of people care as much for each other, even if it was 6 months of them playing together. Like if one of their players would have died, it would have not been that big of a deal.
So
They might have mourned them in the sense of, oh, let's go have a beer. But like when you've played 6 months of real time, like, and one of your friends goes down, like that's a big deal, in my opinion.
That should be a stop moment where everybody's like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
holy shit! How are we gonna go on without this?"
So I've had mixed experiences with that. I had a campaign that we ran, and a character went down. And this was probably our first big session kind of together that it was probably a year-long campaign. But we had a party member go down, and the group, it wasn't really the players themselves, or the characters themselves, it was the players were kind of cracking jokes and stuff, and about how the player went down and things of that nature. And they had an NPC with them. So I actually had the NPC turn on them and tell them, I'm not traveling with you. I just saw that person had a more physical reaction to the player dying than the party members.
Did that change your party members' outcome
I feel like
or view?
I feel like it did to a degree. I feel like they were kind of like taken aback by it or whatever, because I don't think they had experienced. It's hard to describe. I don't think they're not natural actors.
Sure.
So they're not getting inside their character's mind a lot of the times. A lot of them come from a background of playing kind of more like top over meta or whatever, like combat wise and stuff of that nature. Especially like an older player that we have that's
tactical D&D.
Been like playing since like 2nd edition or but I have had experiences too where I've had characters die and I've had players react to it. Like kind of be broken up about it and felt guilty. It has happened before on a separate occasion. So I've had it both ways. Really.
So what you're talking about, I don't know if it's the same instance, but could you explain when one of your characters died, and then the outcome when you were a player, and then the outcome of when that happened, and like how the players in that party reacted?
Okay.
Because there's a particular story, and I don't want to tell your story, but you can tell the story.
So I had a character that I played in probably about a 3-year-long campaign. The character didn't play for the full 3 years because probably about 6 months into the campaign or so, I had my first character death ever. I've been playing D&D since I was a kid, and we usually only played a few sessions here and there. No one ever really died. But this was my first character death, and I was dead.
Sure.
So I was kind of shocked by it. The DM did a great job of describing me going on to the afterlife. He had like music going in the background, and there was even an option for me to possibly come back. One of the players casted Reincarnate on me, but he was a devout cleric, and he saw his god in the distance calling him to the sea, and at that moment, after the way it was described, my character didn't want to come back. He was with his god. So
you were happy with the death you were given.
So he left the party, and so he had a best friend in the party. They were super close, kind of grown up on the seas together because they were sailors. And his character did not take it very well, to the point where when my new character came in, he was very hostile towards him, thinking that he was taking my previous character's spot.
Okay, I could see it, yeah.
So we had a very adversarial experience compared to our last two characters that were best friends. Yeah.
Fun.
So that was a pretty fun experience.
Well, that's cool. That's a lasting impression on a character who was still alive after the fact of, but that character's death impacted.
Yeah, and it did go to because we played for another 2 years after that, 2.5 years. And those characters did end up becoming very good friends over the course of fighting together and everything, but
that trust was earned over time.
Yeah.
But if you guys can't hear yourself, then you need to be closer to the mic, because you're screaming into the mic.
Okay.
Just to let you know, we just have to practice. It's like Jeff said, like
Sure.
you have to teach yourself to be up on the mic.
I don't hear anything.
Okay, I hear myself.
You hear yourself yet?
I hear.
I can hear you.
Okay,
I
well,
can
that's
hear
good
you.
enough.
Okay.
I don't need to hear myself.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't know if it's in here or out there,
okay,
but I can hear you.
but as long as you can hear us.
Right channel works really
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
Maybe it's the headphones.
Yeah, I actually had to switch over headphones to these little cheap ones.
Blame my daughter.
Yeah. No, yeah, so I agree with everything you were saying. I think that some of the stuff that gets characters really involved in the game and gets them to the point where like they're invested is not just the player or not just the DM, it's both. So one of the player deaths that happened in a game that both me and Cody played in, we were... Is that better?
Wubba lubba dub
Is that better?
dub. Yep.
Okay. It might just be the mic. So we started playing the same DM as the one that you were just talking about. Probably one of the best DMs I've played with, and like taught us a lot of stuff from moving from high school playing where you're just trying to kill shit. You don't care about the story. You know, we didn't play with music. We didn't play with any kind of really huge description. It was mostly you walk into a town, you walk into an encampment, and we always had that dude that was half vampire, half demon, half
With
you
a
know,
robot arm. And
robot arm, construct arm, you know, all this crazy shit. So, great DM. But we played one session, and at the end of that session, a player died, and that was probably one of the most impactful like deaths, and I still remember it. It was we were playing children, and we were told to go to the forest to go cut wood, and we went and started cutting wood, and we started
Seems safe.
getting too close to going too far into the woods, and we could hear someone coming, so the two of us went running, and the third person tripped. Well, to go find out, we accidentally somehow stumbled into the Dukes or whatever,
the Kingswood.
and
Those were his trees.
those were his trees.
Oh no permits were pulled on that.
Yeah, and
time.
yeah, no permits. And the DM, he pulled no punches. He rolled his dice, and the player rolled his dice on trying to get out of the situation. And that was the first time for me. GM started playing music, and he started really describing what was happening. The next day, you know, the town sheriff or whatever shows up with the kid, and they fucking hang him. And for going to the King's Woods, player death, bam, done. And that was one game. That was one game that I'll remember the rest of my life. And that's what I...
Level 0 kids.
Goosebumps. That gave me a minor wood. That sounds fun.
But what was awesome about it was just... I'll remember that forever because like the descriptions and what he said, and we were invested as players. I think that it's hard sometimes, and sometimes you get worn down as a DM when maybe your players are invested, maybe in the sense of like they always show up every time. You know,
What?
They're
That
always
happens?
they're always bringing their dice. They're always, you know, ready to go. But I think being invested in the game is more than that. I think that you need to come to the game prepared just as much as the DM, you know, in a sense of like maybe you're not describing everything, but have a little bit of description of what your character looks like. Have a description of like a little bit of the background, and be invested. Like, would your character really not care about this person that even just 3 weeks that you traveled with?
Right.
I mean, how long does it take you in real life to make friends with someone at work? You know, a new job.
A really long time. People
Well,
suck.
some people it takes
Sorry,
a day.
that's just me.
So-
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
You know, so I think that
Depends if you're a tough guy.
yeah.
Hard
Yeah.
exterior.
Yeah, I think that it really comes down to the players, and I think that maybe using other players to engage, you know, people is a good thing. I don't think it's just falling on DM's
No,
job.
there's already too much we do.
Yeah,
Can't write all of the storylines and can't write all the emotions. The emotions need to feel real.
I give out scripts before each session that I do.
well, that's good. I
didn't get one
usually
for
don't
this.
get it. Yeah, I usually don't get it when we start.
So I need you to cry at this point.
Yeah.
Apparently, he can do it on command.
Yeah.
So, really quick, Let's actually take a break. I need to use the restroom and maybe grab some water and stuff, and then we'll come back and talk more.
Okay.
All right, so we are back. So while we were gone, trying to talk about different things. So I guess my question is, what are good tools or good advice you could give to DMs to help them keep their players engaged in your game?
Keep them engaged in the game. Make it sound like you're having fun too. Be the life of the party. When you explain things and explore settings, don't just explain it. Explain it. Emphasize words. Make it seem bigger than the table you're sitting at. Try and paint a picture. Don't just say words. I'm a very visceral. That's probably the wrong word. But I like exploring scenes in my head as I talk about them.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to, when I talk about things, imagine what that looks like in my mind's eye and do a really good job at it. So for me, to be able to explain or set a setting, it's a really cool picture. And if you do a good enough job, everybody else can hopefully get an image of that same picture. And I think that really lends well to the table as a group, getting everybody to buy into the world.
Yeah. What do you think?
Pay your
Cody?
players.
Okay.
No,
Pay them to show up.
I think kind of along the same terms Matt was saying, the energy I think you bring to the session is the energy that the players are going to demonstrate. So if you're kind of sitting there and going through the motions, it kind of puts them back into kind of a position where they're like just kind of going. I find towards the end of the night that can happen sometimes. I'm getting tired. You know, things are kind of settling down. I'm very unenergetic with how I'm describing things. And I think the players kind of start to wind down too, and they're not quite as invested.
It's easy to finish off when everyone's like, okay, well, we just killed our 5th group of bad guys, and you guys seem to be in a pretty good place. Cool. I mean, it's a completely different tone at the end of the night than it is at the beginning of the night. You set up this grand scheme, and you always have these. You spend days, weeks thinking about how you're going to start the session. You don't think about how you're going to end the session because you can't ever plan the end of a session. So I don't think as DMs we're able to see what that end looks like, but we really know what the beginning looks like. So start off really strong, set a really good tone, and then, like you say, it's hard to keep that energy because you haven't planned it out, and you're just trying to keep it up, and eventually it is gonna wane off. And that's
so I think if you're able to keep the energy, you're gonna keep the players more invested. I also think it's a kind of an individual player question, because certain players, I feel like, are interested in different things, and that different things are going to get them interested. I feel like there's players who, once you throw a combat in, they perk up. They're like, oh, okay, we're doing this. Let me show you how cool my character is. There's certain players who are more interested in being put into a intense conversation with an NPC.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. But that's kind of...
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I think that, like, a good example is, like, actually our last game I was going to run. It was literally the day of the game, and I just wasn't feeling it. And it really, as a DM.
Okay.
And so I just called it and just said, it's just not going to happen today.
Oh, so
and
you canceled the session?
Yeah, because it was out of, like, the respect of, I feel like as a DM, if you don't have that energy that day, like physically, mentally, you're just maybe dealing with a lot of stuff, or you just feel overwhelmed. I feel like the players can sense that, and when you go into it, especially the game that we're playing, we have a lot of people that are like, business owners and have a lot of things going on in families, and especially probably you. I mean, all of us do. We're older. I feel like that would have hurt the game more than just calling it. If people had shown up and I exactly what you guys were saying. I wasn't really engaging the players.
Sure.
I was just running through the motions,
Wasting their time.
and I'm wasting their time at that point, versus just
Okay.
calling it. Yeah, so I totally agree. I think that it's, I've said it a couple of times in different topics. I don't feel like it's just the DM's responsibility to control every aspect and control everything that's going on with the players and keeping them engaged all the time. But it is a big aspect, like you can kind of feel it when your DM is not as interested. You start getting that feeling that they didn't put in the work,
Right.
And so it kind of makes you, as a player, go, well, maybe I won't show up next week.
Have you ever done a session where at the end of it you're like, fuck,
Oh yeah,
really shouldn't have ran today because looking around everyone's like, why did we do this?
yeah, no, totally. I feel like I don't know how you feel, Cody, but for myself, I feel like that was a lot of the younger years of playing. Like, even though we had less responsibilities, it was kind of like, oh, let's play D&D. Everyone got jacked up. Let's go play D&D. Okay, cool. I'll throw something together. And it literally is like thrown together. And then at the end of the game, you're just kind of like, well, that was kind of a waste of our time.
Meaningless.
It was still fun to hang out with your friends, but it wasn't like the idea of like this great adventure.
Which
I don't know what you feel like.
No, I agree, but I also feel like it fit the type of characters we played at that point because we didn't really care about a story. But I do agree it was more just kind of thrown together combat situations, mostly in ways for us to
Right.
end up at the brothel. That was about the
Yeah.
Go get
extent
some
of
so
it,
you can
yeah.
buy some illicit drugs, get high on some weed,
Yeah.
pretty much.
buy all the beer in the tavern, and go assault some waitresses upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a good day at the tavern.
Yeah. Just another day at the tavern. So I think that this is a good point to probably stop, and we'll pick this up in 2 weeks, and then we can sit and talk about a little bit what else is happening in our games. How often do you play?
So I think I'm playing again this Friday. I don't know.
Okay.
They have we all are in a group chat on just our phones, text messages back and forth, and I'm so busy throughout the day I literally don't read it. My players all talk
Yeah.
in it, and they all talk in character, out of character in it. So there's a lot of meta talk and a lot of table talk, and I don't mind. I would rather that to me tells me that they're engaged and they love the world because they're spending their free time outside of the game talking about what their characters are doing and what their ambitions and goals are. But I don't read into it. So
You don't know if you're playing this Friday or not. That was
that's
We'll
where
find
I'm
out.
going.
Yeah.
We'll find out. I have no idea what.
All right.
Just like every other aspect of my life, I'm just along for the ride. It feels like.
yeah. Well, you guys are
So we
playing.
play about every other week, or that's what we shoot
That's what
for.
we aim for, yeah.
Changes sometimes. I get into situations where I might have half the party not be able to show up, and at that point, I debate whether I cancel the game or whether we try to even play a short session that's more just cruising around town or whatever. It's a difficult situation
Do you
sometimes with so
often-
many players.
Do you often end your sessions back at starting point, or do you find yourself often stuck in the middle of somewhere where everybody's there and it feels very awkward to play without some key people?
Both. Recently, most of the sessions have been ending in town, but we're starting to get to the point where I feel like they'll be venturing out quite a bit more from the town. And usually I end up throwing players in the background. I have them travel with them. They just don't participate in combat and things of that
Sure.
nature. Just because I don't want to try to wave my hand and they're magically with the party when
Yeah.
next time when they do show up.
Yeah, don't play
Yeah.
the character. Let them
Yeah.
play the character.
Unless it works out that they're in a party in town, and I could just be like, "Oh, this person went to the tavern, and they're going to deal with some stuff while
Right.
you do whatever."
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that? Like, do you feel like you need to stop at a point? So in my game, it ended with the players. Most of the players, not all of them, have spent all of their rage spells, healing, everything, and there's like they're out in the wilderness on a trail or a road, and some figures are literally standing on a hill watching them, which is either going to gauge them right back into combat,
Right.
or I have a way that I'm going to use to get around it, and this might ruin it for Cody, but I think that at this point, if we're going to do this podcast, we're going to end up ruining shit for each other.
Right,
So yeah.
I don't listen.
Earbuffs. But I've been looking up the rules on fear, and so what I'm going to do is introduce a creature that causes fear, which is going to make them run into the woods, the players. And then that's how I'm going to pull out players that can't make it. They're going to get lost in the woods on the way to the town that they're running to. And then they'll get to the town and pretty much everything will continue on there. I personally, we're in a group chat, the three of us, and I really enjoy it because I probably will put stuff in there for questions on that kind of stuff, and hopefully it won't ruin it for Cody. Some of the stuff, obviously, I won't put in it that I know will for sure ruin it for him. But it's a good way for us to get into each other's brains and ask questions about items
Absolutely.
or what to do in certain circumstances. But for me, there was a game we were playing in the shop, and almost every time I stopped it at the inn, because it was real easy to be like, oh, this character is sleeping, so we're going to go adventure out without him.
Sure.
I think that's a really good way to do it, but it's not
all sessions.
It's not a solve all.
back.
Yeah, no, because there's gonna be sessions where the two of you guys, actually all three of us technically, you're in the middle of an adventure, or not even the middle of an adventure. You're in the beginnings of an adventure. You're standing on a road, and then two players don't show up to a game, and you're
Right.
like, well, where do they go? So
This is probably a topic for a whole nother podcast, but let me just put this out there. What do you do when you write a key moment for a player? You know this is that player's moment, something special's go on with them, and they're the one that doesn't make the session, and the whole thing has kind of led to them doing something at this session.
Failure's a bitch.
Yeah, it sucks. I'll tell you that.
wait, was that me?
No, I've had that moment happen several times
Okay.
where I'm trying to dive into a character's background, and then that character's the one that misses the session.
Yeah.
It's like,
You put all this work in.
yeah,
Now it just you
So
have
now I
this
have to try to-
moment.
yeah,
Figure out how to work it in later and make it feel authentic again.
yeah.
Work twice.
I wonder if there's an easier way to go about that with.
I've canceled a session before because of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it because the situation you were in, you couldn't pull out of it? You couldn't.
they were.
You were
engaged
already
into something that.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I had to cancel the session because it was it was too important that the character was there.
Okay.
So.
Hmm.
Not necessarily for combat reasons, for story reasons.
I wonder if that's something that we can like you said, talking to another one, maybe even next week. I mean, that's a good topic of figuring out what to do with players that don't show up. Another thing I would like to talk about, I think we were talking about, is removing players. There's
forcibly you're no longer in the group. You gotta go.
Yeah.
Or, ooh.
I think so. I think that's something that at this point in our lives, you have the whole Mercer thing. We were talking about it a little bit, me and Matt, when he was helping me move, and I think that the Mercer thing not necessarily is a bad thing. I don't think it is a bad thing. We're fucking adults now, and it's not all about going into a dungeon and whipping your dick out and showing how big your dick is and killing a bunch of shit. I want to engage my players, and I want their time to be worth coming in.
It's a big chunk of time in a week to come and hang out.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
sit
it's the time that you spend as a DM before you even play. I mean, I know that probably easily the three of us probably spend at least an hour before a game. I would say even a couple hours. I've spent 8 hours. I spent a whole day trying to prepare for my game the next day, writing riddles, puzzles, all this stuff. And I think we've all had that player that comes in and ruins it all for everyone.
I think that's the thing. It needs to be ruined for everybody and not just shitting on your parade.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that personally, I have possibly a player in my group that is like that, and he's very reckless. And I feel like I think I was saying this before when we didn't catch our first session of talking about stuff is. More I think about it, I don't think it's going to come down to him dying. I think that he's going to end up getting another player killed. But then at that point, hopefully that other player doesn't quit. That they
due to his bad intentions.
yeah, exactly. Or selfishness,
Sure.
or it's the idea that we talked about this before, and we'll probably get into a couple of different sessions of our podcasting life here now. Is the difference between a seasoned player, a good player, a bad player, and a new player. I think those are all four different things. You can be a seasoned player and still fucking suck. You can be a brand new player and be one of the best players. We have Chloe, one of my old apprentices, a girl that works for me now. She was awesome. I don't believe you have to do voices, but she did voice. She was like really engaged, wanted to have a backstory, wanted to have a reason she was carrying certain items. Yeah, and then we had players that say that they had been playing for the last 11 years and all he did was walk around killing innocent people. Yeah. So I personally don't feel like, I don't know how people feel, I don't feel like the Mercer thing is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It's setting expectations for us as DMs to do a little bit more work than being people that set up a situation where you kill 300 goblins and rescue the half-naked chick and fuck her,
Right.
So but at the same time, I think that we should expect our players to respect that and give a little bit, even if they gave a fourth of the shit that we give into the game.
Sure.
That's just the way I see. But I think that's a good spot to stop on. And maybe next week, I think what we'll pick up on is maybe talking about some of those things. Like maybe if you guys want to talk about, we can talk about, do you remove those players? Do you try to talk to them before? Do you reward the players that are not the problem? Maybe solutions. Items like XP. Maybe not even that. Maybe just spending more time on their character.
I think that's
Yeah,
exactly.
maybe-
Give their character more life.
Exactly.
jobs.
Oh, hand jobs. Hand jobs are always nice.
Get your
So-
hand away from me.
Okay, so this was Avery
Cody.
And Molson.
with
Cost of
the cost of mana.
mana.
Thanks for listening. Probably just my brother.